Please, let's Q&A. No
Report in. All systems go. Let's go.
Where I go?
Okay, guys, let's rock and roll.
Hello, all you wonderful fools. It's time for the Mr. T Show.
All aboard!
Here we go, let's start the show. Hosted by Mr. T. Nintendo video games are the favorite ones for me. News and reviews, some gameplay too. Battling drones is what I do. M-I-Z-Z-A-H, it's the show by Mr. T. It's the show by Mr. T. Ooh. Hey fools, it's Mr. T with another one of those analysis videos, and this video will be an introspective on one of my favorite Nintendo franchises, Star Fox. I'll be doing a little bit of history with the franchise, my history and experience with it, and then some speculation on what I would like to see from Star Fox for Wii U, coming this year. So let's get into it, shall we fools? First up, Star Fox for Super Nintendo. The game that started it all, launched in 1993. On the illustrious Super Nintendo Entertainment System. Amidst many challengers in the early 90s, trying to one-up 16-bit hardware to challenge Nintendo and Sega's dominance of the gaming market, we started to get a plethora of CD-based consoles. Full motion video was the catchphrase of the day, sort of like the way that Full HD is today, and to display games with cutscenes that incorporated higher resolution graphics, fully acted cutscenes with real-life actors, and high-quality sound, it was believed your system had to be CD-based. CDs obviously allowed for more data and memory for games necessary to achieve those goals. Nintendo themselves jumped into the CD race, looking for a company to bring a CD add-on to the Super Nintendo, as their closest competitor Sega successfully launched the Sega CD. Their scurrying about brought on terrible licensing deals, with the likes of Philips giving them rights to make games with Nintendo characters, games that are not to be spoken of. But also, it led to a deal with Sony, basically bringing them into the gaming business after the ill-fated joint venture that was the Nintendo PlayStation. After some tinkering, Nintendo realized they could simply add a hardware chip to each cartridge for the SNES hardware that the hardware could access to increase a game's memory and graphical fidelity. And then came the prototype by the British development studio Argonaut Games. They had been working on a 3D engine for console games that caught Nintendo's eye. 18-year-old Dylan Cuthbert, who was one of the lead programmers at the studio, was the one who developed the engine. After being impressed by Dylan's Game Boy game, known as X and only released in Japan, Miyamoto began thinking about how much better games like Pilot Wings and F-Zero could have been if they didn't have to spend so much time faking the 3D by drawing 2D sprites from multiple angles. Miyamoto longed to make games that had true 3D models and environments on the Super Nintendo. Argonaut then presented Miyamoto with a 3D prototype called SNES Glider, but it only ran at 3 frames per second. Nintendo realized more hardware was necessary, like I said before, to get it to run well, and gave the company $1 million to create that hardware. And with some help, they designed one of the first chips with a 3D graphics accelerator, and they called it the Mario chip, which is known to us as the Super FX chip. And with Dylan Cuthbert at the lead, they began designing a game to Miyamoto's requests of a spaceship rail shooter, and with the use of sacred animals from ancient Japanese lore, Star Fox was born. The main designs, like the R-Wing, were purposely designed as a collection of triangle shapes to appease the hardware limitations of the Super Nintendo. James McCloud and his pals, Peppy Hare, Falco Lombardi, and Slippy Toad faced off against the evil monkey Andros and his minions. The game was met with critical and commercial success. The game also took inspiration from classic puppet TV shows like Thunderbirds, as Miyamoto was a big fan of that show. That's why the original art for Star Fox had photographed practical puppet figures of the heroes, including James, on the cover. And after the game's success, Star Fox 2 for Super Nintendo went into development. That's right, Star Fox 2. Ever played it? No? Well, that's because the game was never officially released, even though it was completely finished. It was set to release in 1996, but Nintendo decided not to because they didn't want to put out another title so late in the SNES library, and they wanted to focus on their upcoming Ultra 64 console. Even after it was widely hyped in magazines, Nintendo decided to cancel it. Dylan Cuthbert, the lead programmer, was dealt a big blow by the game's cancellation. Star Fox 2 is often regarded as the best in the franchise by Star Fox elitists. Yes, they do exist. Star Fox 2 implemented some really cool things, like being able to freely navigate the planetary map and strategize, plot courses on that map, which is interactive, allowing you to attack and be attacked by approaching enemies. You could transform your R-Wing in certain missions to fly to the ground and become a walking tank. It was pretty cool for its time. These features would be used in ways in later Star Fox games, as you'll see. Star Fox 2 was later unofficially released. One of the lead programmers of the game decided to leak the final build. It runs and looked great, and you can get yourself a copy of the game from either Amazon or eBay from around $80 to $100. I just bought myself one. And then the most famous Star Fox game of all, Star Fox 64. Star Fox 64 was a revolutionary game for a revolutionary system. Along with having awesome controls, gameplay, amazing graphics for its time, Star Fox 64 brought on its own revolution. Controller force feedback by the way of the Rumble Pack, creating an industry standard that still holds to this day. In a genius stroke, Nintendo bundled the Rumble Pack with early copies of Star Fox 64, ensuring that all players who bought the game would get a chance to get a taste of that Rumble feature, and it was amazing. On a personal note, Star Fox 64 is embedded deep in my memory for a really specific reason. It was the last video game my mom ever bought me. I was in school, but I had just got my first part-time job, and Star Fox 64 released just a few days before my birthday. And so for me, it was kind of the end of an era. I was a big boy now, and I was buying my own video games. If you remember my video on my all-time favorite console being the N64, you remember one of the reasons I chose it as my favorite console was because, to me, it was the first time that I was self-aware as a gamer. I was buying video games with my own money, and to me, that's when you truly make that transition as a gamer. But enough about that. Let's get back to Star Fox. This time you learn that James was betrayed and killed, and you play his son, Fox McCloud, now running his dad's team. Andross is once again the main villain. Not only do you get to pilot the R-Wing, but also certain levels will have you using the tank, also known as the Landmaster, and the submarine, called the Blue Marine. The game introduced voice acting for the first time in the series, with Slippy's voice being the most notorious, aka most annoying. Poor Slip. All in all, Star Fox 64 is the most beloved and respected game in the franchise. And from there, we'll move to the least loved and respected, and that's 2002's Star Fox Adventures for GameCube. I'm not going to say much about Star Fox Adventures. One of the reasons is that it wasn't really a true Star Fox game. Yes, there were elements of Star Fox in there, but they were mostly tacked on. I plan on making a video specifically about the evolution of Dinosaur Planet, so I won't detail here. But even though Star Fox Adventures wasn't a true Star Fox game, I still love it. It has a great story, beautiful visuals, even today, and fun gameplay. But the true sequel to Star Fox 64 didn't show up until Star Fox Assault, a return to the classic mechanics of Star Fox with a few quirks. Along with flying missions, there were now on-foot missions, with the third-person perspective allowing for seamless gameplay from on-foot to Landmaster tank, and so on. The game was a mild success, but could have benefited from more time in the oven tweaking the controls. It was a joint venture with Namco, who had also planned to release an arcade game alongside Star Fox Assault, but they later scrapped that idea. Star Fox Assault received mostly positive views, as it debuted near the end of the GameCube's life cycle, and it would be the last Star Fox to ever appear on home consoles. And so the next iteration of Star Fox was Star Fox Command for Nintendo's insanely successful handheld, the Nintendo DS, and it was a return to the mechanics brought forth by Star Fox 2. Nintendo had tasked lead programmer of Star Fox 2, Dylan Cuthbert, who at the time had started his own company called Q Games. Dylan brought back the strategy elements of Star Fox 2 and merged it with the mechanics of Star Fox 64. The game was yet another mild success, ushering in the remake of a classic for the next handheld, the Nintendo 3DS. It emerged as Star Fox 64 3D, a ground-up graphical remake of Star Fox 64, bringing with it glasses-free stereoscopic 3D and also gyro controls to pilot your vehicle. The game was a huge success and stands as one of the best-selling and most beloved games for the Nintendo 3DS handheld. And now, the long-awaited return to consoles for Star Fox, and the console for its return is the Nintendo Wii U. Although we know it's being co-developed with Miyamoto's team, we don't yet know who the other team is. Many speculate it could be Namco again, or even Retro, but most, like myself, hope that it's Platinum Games. Platinum's sharp cartoony wit, fast-paced and quirky action would fit right at home in a Star Fox game. And there was the obvious Star Fox tease in Bayonetta 2. It just makes sense, and I hope it comes true. But let's talk about what we do know about the game. But rather than me repeating the same information over, let's just take a look at this clip of IGN Nintendo contributor Jose Otero speaking about his time with Star Fox Wii U and what he knows about the game.
All right, so Star Fox is being worked on by Miyamoto. It involves the gamepad now, and so the way you remember Star Fox playing, they're pretty much sticking to that for the most part, where the analog stick is the primary input for how you fly. The right stick is for the fancy tricks, so you can do your barrel rolls or your 180s and whatnot. And the way the gamepad works with it is actually really interesting because on the gamepad screen you have a first-person view with their aiming reticle, and so you can change the aiming reticle to sort of, you're basically aiming with the gamepad, but you're using the left stick to fly, so you're kind of looking between both. Now, I'm sure in your mind you're like, well, how does that help Star Fox? I'll tell you how. Take my iPhone. All right. In prior Star Foxes, if this was an R-wing and I was shooting at you, the reticle would sort of move with the ship. Yeah. So I'd be shooting at you, and then I'd sort of have to pull away because I don't want to collide against the character that is Tim Garry's. Yes. With this new controller setup, they've set it up so that I can basically set up sort of these flying routes where I can continue to fire on you the entire time. I could have the ship going one way and aiming completely the other.
Okay, so it's more like a traditional first-person shooter.
A little bit,
so it's like the Banshee and Halo, kind of?
A little bit. And so far, they're tying all of the aiming mechanics to the gamepad. They're also tying or toying around with ideas of playing as different sort of ships. So right now they have sort of the tank that you saw on one of the the Landmaster's back. You click in the right stick, I think it was, and it'll transform and drop to the ground. It's instant.
So did it, from what you played, was it like Star Fox 64 where you're kind of like in a valley going through?
Great
or
question.
Was it more like the all-range mode of the boss fights?
It was the all-range mode of the boss fights, but a question was asked about that, and Miyamoto says, the valleys and sort of the on-rail sections will be returning, but they're trying to find ways to play around with that as well. It's still super early, and then the bigger question is, are you going to get out of your ship? Is that going to be another portion of it? Well, at least let's hope that if they do approach that idea again, that Miyamoto finds a way to make it more interesting than the last time. And I have a lot of faith in him. I think that he very much could, but I found it very interesting that it is super early and it is a tech demo, but they are committing to making this game, and it's going to be a thing that's going to happen. The other ship, by the way, that you got to play was more like a hovercraft slash like helicopter style thing.
There's like a helicopter.
Yeah,
That's
and you can deploy a robot out of the bottom, so it'll come out on an umbilical cable, and on the gamepad you'll actually see the first-person perspective and be able to drive that thing remotely. But it comes at the risk of you just hovering and not taking fire. So you have to be sort of very careful with when you use it. In that stage, it was also really cool because they had like this big Godzilla-style monster roaming around in the background.
Now that was some pretty cool information, but I want to add to it by stating things I want to see. I feel like some people kind of just want a prettier version of Star Fox 64, as far as the gameplay goes for this Wii U sequel. I don't believe there is enough gameplay variety in Star Fox 64 to be enough for a game in 2015. At least not a big game. I believe the series needs to evolve and expand. The Light system needs to be dramatically expanded, bigger, a more epic story with more worlds, bigger dogfights and battles, and more varied gameplay. I would like to see a return of the on-foot missions from Star Fox Assault, but with much improved controls. Perhaps that will expand the game and make it feel more epic. I like the idea for certain missions to have the ability to dogfight in my R-Wing, then fly down to the planet's surface and take on enemies on foot, hop into a landmaster, and drive off to take on an enemy base, and do that all seamlessly. I don't want to strip away the core of what makes Star Fox games great, like the on-rails dogfighting or even the all-range mode segments. I just want to add to that core and expand upon it to make Star Fox greater and even more appealing to a broader audience. And finally, I want to touch on my theory for Miyamoto's Project Guard and Project Giant Robot. Remember those prototypes Miyamoto was working on that he showcased at E3 2014? I don't think they're going to be just standalone games, but perhaps gameplay scenarios within Star Fox for Wii U. If you remember these demos, they had distinctly Star Fox elements, like the declaration of Mission Accomplished when you win a battle, complete with fonts from Star Fox 64. If you paid a little attention to Project Guard, you can see Star Fox logos in that game. So I'm sure this theory is sound, and I look forward to seeing this come into Star Fox in a cool, unique way. Perhaps we'll get that at E3 this year. Things will definitely get interesting. And how about some online multiplayer dogfights? I mean, come on. The only game with online multiplayer in the Star Fox series was Star Fox Command for Nintendo DS. That was some time ago. Well, anyway, Star Fox is one of my favorite Nintendo franchises. Not only am I excited about its return, but I'm also excited that the mastermind Shigeru Miyamoto is again in the director's seat and heavily involved. The best games in the series were the ones that he was directly involved with, like Star Fox 1 and 2 and Star Fox 64. So I'm very excited to see this new game in the series. I can't wait. Alright guys, that's it for this introspective video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you're a big fan of Star Fox like I am, head on over and check out The Gaming Historian. He has a great 4-part video on the Star Fox series. It helped me make this video, but it's way more detailed about each game, and it's just excellent. The videos are about 7 minutes each, and are entertaining and definitely informative. I implore you to check him out. And I also want to give a big shout out to YouTuber Rick Konami. He's the one that's provided me with this excellent mock-up video of Star Fox that you saw at the beginning of the video and throughout. He does really awesome HD remakes of intros for classic games. And I implore you guys to subscribe and check out his videos. I mean, they're really awesome. So again, I really want to thank him for providing me with this footage. I think it really helped the video. Links to both of their channels will be in the description, of course. So what's your thoughts and hopes for Star Fox? What would you like to see in Star Fox for Wii U? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Oh yeah, one more thing. Play Nintendo, fools!